Hello and welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and this is a great episode with guest Jeff Patterson. We cover a range of fascinating topics about meditation and martial arts. He shares fascinating insights about the breath and the immune system and how different breaths are appropriate for different times of the year. I learned so much in this episode. Jeff Patterson is a highly experienced martial artist residing in Portland, Oregon, with over 36 years of practice under his belt. Jeff is a firm believer in the benefits of meditative arts and their power to enhance overall life experiences. Jeff has authored 3 books, created 2 audio courses, and produced hundreds of instructional videos, sharing his extensive knowledge and expertise. Through his dedication and teachings, Jeff has positively impacted the lives of thousands of individuals, providing them with the tools and techniques to improve their overall well-being. I know you're going to love this episode, and we'll get right to it. But first, for you plant lovers out there, are you familiar with Pure Leaf? Pure Leaf is an alternative and complementary approach to conventional plant care and pest control methods. It's a natural, non-toxic alternative for caring for your plants. There are compounds to help give your plants more vitality as well as address plant health issues. As a plant lover myself, I personally love the indoor superfood and nutrient booster. Try Pure Leaf for yourself and use code KARAG20 for a whopping 20% off your order. That's KARAG20 for 20% off. And now, enjoy this episode. Welcome, Jeff. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here as well.
So let's start by talking a little bit about your background and what led you to martial arts.
Yes. So I started in my mid-teens and continued training I joined the Marine Corps, went through college, training the whole time. I taught martial arts through college to help pay for my education. And then I met a teacher in college who was a very well-known boxing coach. And I was really into Western boxing then. And he kind of opened my eyes to some of the other practices, Tai Chi and Qigong, some of the meditative practices, getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And, as a young guy, my main focus was wanting to do Western boxing, and I just loved it. I love the strategy. I love the game. I love the intensity. And after meeting this gentleman, I'd only known him for 2 or 3 weeks. And I remember him saying, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. And I remember thinking, isn't that for like old people in the park? How is that going to help me? I started doing the practice, and it changed my life in so many ways. And I wouldn't be where I am today without the practice.
Wow. So I'm curious about, because you do have such extensive experience with the different forms of martial arts. And I'm curious just about what led you to exploring different traditions and what some of the differences and similarities are in a general sense with them.
Well, I think as far as similarities, that's one of the things that meditation and Tai Chi really helps with, because a lot of people who do martial arts as a hobby, say they do it 2 or 3 hours a week, it's really hard to get to a deep root in the practice. And the meditative arts help you find that root and that sensitivity. It teaches you about being more aware of your body, being more grounded, learning how to use the energy and the movements. And all of this is the same, whether you're doing jujitsu or you're doing Muay Thai or you're doing Eskrima. It's those basic core fundamentals. Once you have those at a deep level, it helps you in anything else you do. One of my old teachers, he always used to say, if you can drive a Toyota, you can drive a Honda. You learn how to drive, and in all of the core fundamentals, the basic roots of the practice are pretty much similar.
Okay. And so how does that meditation focus assist with the physical practices of the martial arts?
In a lot of ways, the meditative practice oftentimes is used not just only in martial arts, but other athletes use it in basketball, baseball, football. Performers use the practice of meditation. And, I look at the meditative arts in a pretty broad term. So, you have your movement practices, you have your breath work, you have sitting meditation, walking meditation, standing meditation. There's so many different directions. Within the Qigong itself, we kind of divide it up into 5 directions. So we have like the martial or athletic side of the training, the therapeutic side, the medical side, the philosophical side, and then also the meditative or spiritual side. And so you can focus on any one of those areas. And as far as relating it to athletics or martial arts, one, it helps with getting to just a deeper level of sensitivity and awareness within the body and being able to listen at a high level. It's one thing, for example, in boxing, if I've got to think about what I'm going to do, I already got hit 3 times. So
Mm.
learning how to develop that higher sensitivity, and it's almost like you're feeling the energy before the movement ever comes out. The meditation helps you read other people and develop that sensitivity at a higher level. And that's why it's so valuable in athletic sports.
I love that. That's wonderful. So, how can you talk a little bit about the performance, that this so many martial artists and other sports athletes and performers get a lot from meditation. Can you talk about how people have optimal performance when they're using Qigong and meditation?
Well, it goes back to the sensitivity. And with any meditative practice, you want to have ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. Meditation's meant to be more of a way of life and less of a hobby. It's something that we integrate into everything we do. And so I always tell new people when they're coming in here is that, you want to get to where at a bare minimum, you're doing 20 minutes of a ritual practice every day and then integrating active practices throughout the day. And that's great thing about active practices is that you don't have to set a lot of time aside. You can do them in a very short amount of time. You could do them as little as 2 or 3 minutes. And it could be as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some energetic circulations in the body or regulating your posture. Within the meditative arts, we also have the basic, what we call the 5 regulations. So regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. Well, all of those things are very in depth and there's a lot of practices that are included in those areas. But by having that overall awareness, it enhances everything you do.
Mm. What would be some examples? You talked, I think we could all understand what like a ritual meditation would be. That would be like a seated meditation that you implement every day, I'm guessing, or some sort of practice
Yes.
that you're implementing every day. And then you talked about the active. What would the philosophical meditation encompass?
Yes. So ritual practices, like you said, could be a seated practice. It could be a Qigong set, a Tai Chi form, a yoga routine. It could be anything that you do that has a meditative approach to it where you set time aside every day. And, meditation is one of those things where you will benefit from it if you do an hour today and then you don't do an hour till next week. But if you do a little bit every day, it builds up momentum. And a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's a whole different experience than doing it as a hobby once in a while. And so I'd much rather see somebody being consistent at just 20 minutes a day than trying to do 2 hours today and 3 hours next week and, kind of have this roller coaster kind of way because that's how our emotions and our body functions. And that baseline rhythm and keeping that smooth and even is so important. The active practices, like I mentioned, there are little things that you can do throughout the day. And one trick I like to do with that to help with new students to get them in the habit of utilizing active practices, would be to just set a reminder on your phone and have it go off every hour, every 90 minutes, and do some breath work or do some spinal rotations, something that you can do to tap back into the body and that awareness. And then lastly, as you mentioned, the philosophical meditations, those are different things that you can do, like forms of gratitude or sayings. Part of one of my meditation teachers, he had me memorize all 81 sayings of the Tao Te Ching, if you ever read that book at all. And in there, there's just a wealth of knowledge. And so you go through and you could use that philosophical side of the training as either a ritual practice or an active practice.
Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, I'm curious about yielding. This is something that I found in my research with you. So tell us what yielding is and how it can be used in everyday life.
Yeah, so there's lots of concepts in the martial arts that we use, and yielding to me is one of the coolest concepts that is comes out of the martial arts. And a lot of times people ask me why I do meditation or why I do tai chi. They never ask why I do jujitsu or boxing, but they're always wondering what the benefit of meditation is. And oftentimes I'll tell them that if the only benefit of a meditative practice was developing yielding skills, it would be enough for me to want to do the practice, because yielding is so rich and deep and can be used in every area of your life. In my book that I just wrote, The Yielding Warrior, it's all about different life applications and training exercises that you can do to develop yielding skills. And there's three different kinds of yielding. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. And physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's used in combat sports and athletics. It's the idea that, I push you, you push me. Whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage would push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. Now, in martial arts, this is important to know how to do, because if I'm walking down the street and I come up against some guy who's 250 pounds and can pick up a Volkswagen Bug, I'm not going to want to wrestle that guy to the ground. I'm going to want to yield to his force and get around him so I can try to survive that encounter. And so we do that whether you play basketball or soccer or in any athletic sports. And in fact, I'm sure you probably have heard of who Phil Jackson is. He used to coach the Chicago Bulls when Michael Jordan was on the team, and he also coached the LA Lakers. Well, he used to have his teams practicing meditation, Tai Chi, and yoga. And part of that is helping them develop those skills of understanding how to be more in tune and how to use the yielding approach. And that's the idea of physical yielding. And now physical yielding is easy to understand the concept, but it's very difficult and takes years and years to get to a high level. But the cool thing about it is, from day one, when you start doing this practice, you start to notice things internally in a lot finer detail. You start noticing your root and your tension and relaxation, your breath, your emotional state. You start seeing things that are a lot more fine and a lot more in tune than you normally would as going through our busy days. And this is where we start moving into mental yielding, which is really cool, in that when you start seeing those things inside yourself, you also start seeing them more clearly in other people. So say, for example, I say something that unsettles you and I pick up on it when it's like this. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. Pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so using yielding in all of our interactions and conversations and relationships is very powerful. And this can be in our personal relationships, in work, in sales, and business, and negotiations. I mean, many ways that we can use this strategy. Then we have emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So say, for example, most people go through the day with emotional ups and downs. Well, rather than being like a roller coaster, with yielding and we start to see things start to move up, we can use our breath, use our strategy to bring it back down. Or if we start to see things fall, we can bring it back up. And now when we see things like this, instead of getting too distracted down this one path and wasting a lot of time and energy on it, we can navigate and be a lot more balanced. And we use different tools like the breath and the regulation of the body and the mind and all of that to help with these different kind of ways of balancing the body and our emotional state. And when I start explaining this to people, which I've been doing for years, I've been running my academy for 30 years here now, and oftentimes people will say, "Oh, that makes so much sense. I use yielding all the time." And I totally agree. Everybody does yielding to some degree all the time, but it's kind of like, if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, he would see things about that scene and the timeline that we would have no clue of what's going on. Whereas the meditative arts helps us see things inside ourselves and inside of other people that I feel like you could never see and never pick up on without that practice.
Mm, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious to go back to something that you talked about earlier, which is what drew you to the martial arts and to boxing. Your whole
Yeah.
meditation journey began with this fascination with boxing and martial arts, and the meditation kind of came later, a little bit later. It sounds like, if I've got my
Yes.
understanding correctly.
Yes.
Um, and so to me, you've done a great job of talking about the intricacies and how they all go together. But I would imagine for a newcomer, somebody who's attracted to boxing, for example, and you say yourself, the meditation piece, you were a little bit like, well, what does this have to do with anything? And it was kind of a surprise as to why one would lead to the other. Um, how has your relationship changed with boxing, for example, or the love of martial arts as that part of you has developed?
It's only deepened and given me a newfound respect for it because I've seen it on multiple different levels that I don't know if I ever would have gotten to, or at least not as fast or from as many different directions if it wasn't for the meditative path.
Mm, okay. And are you still doing boxing, or is boxing even considered really a martial art, or is that a little bit different?
Yeah, I think any combat sport could be considered a martial art. So yeah, here at the academy, we do Western boxing, Muay Thai kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Eskrima, and then we have our meditative program, which is Tai Chi, Qigong, Bagua, Xingyi, and each one.
Okay. Interesting. So, what does your meditation practice, you yourself, as a busy business owner and an author, and all of the different initiatives that you have and all the students under your wing, for you personally, what does your meditation practice look like now?
Well, I practice every day. I haven't missed a day of my morning ritual since my hip surgery about 4 years ago. And so I'm on it all the time. I've just seen so much benefits from the practice that, I never am going to stop. When I first started doing the meditative arts and my boxing coach was teaching me a Tai Chi form, he taught me 3 movements and he told me that he wanted me practicing about an hour a day. And so I would do this and I would go down to my basement every day and I'd practice for about an hour. And I was just doing these 3 simple movements that you could show somebody in one class. And 2 or 3 months goes by and he hadn't shown me anything else. And I'm still doing these 2 or 3 movements. And I wasn't just doing an hour a day. I would do about an hour and a half a day because everything he told me to do, I treated like it was gold. And I really wanted to impress him and do as much as I could get good, and so at about the 3 or 4 month mark, I started getting kind of frustrated and feeling like, man, is this guy ever going to show me anything? What am I doing here with this? And I'm sure he saw that in me. I was still going to the boxing gym and still meeting up with him and training and still pushing that direction. But then at about the 6 or 7 month mark, I went down to my basement one morning to do my practice, and I looked up at the clock and an hour and a half had gone by and it seemed like 15 minutes. And it was almost magical. I was like, what just happened? How did that time go by so quick? And ever since that day, it's been part of my life, and I'm never going back.
So he didn't end up adding anything new, that you just kind of changed your relationship with the same practice? Is that what you mean?
Well, I didn't add anything new up until that day. Once he realized that I had kind of made that realization, he showed me the rest of the form in about 2 weeks. And so,
Wow.
and from there, my practice is just has blossomed. I've studied a lot of different areas of the meditative arts. But that's what originally got me started. And I think a lot of times people get discouraged because they try meditation. And, one of the most common things I've heard people say through the years, and I've had a lot of students come through the academy, probably well over 24,000 students just here at my physical location. And one of the most common things I hear people say is that I've tried meditation, but I can't do it because I can't quiet my mind. Meditation isn't about quieting your mind. It's kind of like building muscle. You do more reps to get stronger. If you just go out and do 1 rep of bench press, you're not going to get very strong. But when you sit down and you meditate for, say, 20 minutes or an hour or whatever that is for you, your mind is going to get distracted. Everybody's does, no matter who they are. And so when your mind gets distracted and you use your focus and your intent to bring it back to center in whatever that meditation is, whether it's an energetic circulation, a body movement, a breath work, whatever it is, and you come back to center. And in that 20 minutes, you may do that 100 times. You just got 100 reps of improving your focus and bringing it back to center. So now when you get stressed or things come up in the day, it's so much easier because you're doing this every day. You're building these reps and you're building that ability to come back to center and find that focus. And that's what meditation is all about. It's a process. And that's why I say it's so important to integrate it and make it a way of life and not just a hobby that we do once in a while.
I love that. Thank you. So I'm also interested in something that you said earlier, which was around that there is a spiritual component with meditation and with, I think it was Qigong that you were talking about at that time. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes.
And of course there are so many different meditation styles, which you also kind of alluded to, but there are styles that utilize the body and they use the sensations of the body, and you're really kind of noticing any tension and working within the confines of the body to have points of reference and to tune into your energy. And then of course there's transcendental meditation, which tends to be kind of transcending the physical and having more of that spirit connection, kind of getting away from the body. And then you've got a lot in between. What type of meditation? I presume it's more of a physical, but then there's also that spiritual component. So I'm curious about your own practice and what you teach.
So Qigong is very deep. When you talk about the spiritual side of the training, we do part of it is, all of Qigong, whether it's the physical, the medical, the philosophical, the spiritual, it's all built on these core fundamental principles. And within the Qigong practice itself, Qigong is often referred to as the science of the breath because there's hundreds of different breathing strategies. And There's sitting meditation, standing meditation, energetic circulations in the body. There's movement forms to generate and activate different parts of the body and work with um, the different energy channels in the body or the different dantians. Um, there is just so many different directions. It's a really open practice. And, in Chinese philosophy, they call using the breath, balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire. And so in Qigong, we use the breath as a strategy to get different outcomes. And sometimes in meditations, we might want to be turning inward, like you were mentioning, or we might want to be focusing outward to create an energy outside of us. And we'll use the breath as a strategy to change that energy. And so, a kind of a way to explain that, if you're not familiar with this, would be if you think about when you laugh. Say you're laughing so hard that your belly hurt, you start to sweat. Sometimes your energy is going outward, and that is something we can use with the breath and mimic to make that energy expand. And that's really good for our creativity. That's really good for building our immune system. If you were somebody coming in here who was recovering from chemotherapy, we do a lot more yang breathing strategies to help build and strengthen the immune system. Then there's the other side. So if you think about a time when maybe you were really depressed or you cried a lot, we're focusing more on the inhale, and it's, we're breathing that air in, and our inhale breath is a lot longer than our exhale breath. This is something that brings our energy inward, which is very valuable for some meditations. However, doing a lot of this kind of practice, especially like, in the middle of winter when the flu season's strong, is not that great because it weakens the immune system. And so strategically, we do different practices through the year to connect with the different energy. We have our heaven, our universal energy, we have our earth energy, and then our humanity energy. And all of those different things are very closely connected and important when you're building a practice, that you understand how to use some of these strategies to get different outcomes.
Wow, that's fascinating. Can you explain a little bit more when you talk about that inhale actually suppresses the immune system? I've never heard that before. So, why is that?
Well, and if you go back to thinking about, I don't know if you've ever personally experienced this, but a lot of people, when they get depressed or maybe something bad happens in their life and they're crying a lot and they're really bringing that energy inward, it's coming back to the center line. And so there's not anything really protecting the outside of the body, right? And so this is why oftentimes when people get depressed, they get sick because of that simple reason. And so understanding this, if we want to get to a deeper level of focus, say, for example, you have a very high stress career and you want to bring that stress level down, we would do a lot more yin, inward, energetic practices to help bring that stress level down, whether it be with your ritual practices or with your active practices. And so you can adjust it. And this is where it becomes really cool because, you'll see some people that'll go with high emotional ups and downs and they're like a roller coaster. Well, when you start to become sensitive to this and learn how to use the breath as a strategy in this way, when you start seeing yourself come up on a rise, you can use the breath to bring it back down. And when you start seeing it start to fall, you can use the breath to bring you back up. And now we can find a lot more balance in our overall physical, energetic, and emotional well-being, which is what the practice is all about.
That is beautiful. I love that. Well, Jeff, this has just been fascinating and enlightening. I've really enjoyed it. Can you tell people how they can connect with you and remind people of your book and so forth?
Yeah. So I have a free book funnel right now. You can go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book and get a free copy of my book. You just pay shipping and handling. I also have an online program that you can check out. You can try it out for a couple weeks and see if it's something that might resonate with you. And if you're in Portland, Oregon, you can always come in and check out the academy as well.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you so much. This has just been wonderful. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.